Hello friends, welcome to our new video. A 17-year-old boy was targeted by the police during a traffic check near Paris, the capital of France. According to the initial report, a young man of Algerian origin was stopped by the police for overspeeding, and later the police fired at him fearing that he might run away again and harm himself or others. After this incident, violent protests began throughout the country. Violent clashes broke out between the protesters and the police at different places. Public and private properties were also damaged. Due to all this situation, President Macron had to postpone his important official visit to Germany. On the other hand, French stars such as footballer Kylian Mbappé and actor Omar Sy have condemned police brutality. But friends, this is not the first protest of this kind in France. Just a few months ago, the French government raised the retirement age from 62 to 64 years, which resulted in nationwide protest. While in October last year, nationwide protests and demonstrations were held against inflation. According to a survey, more than 60 protest movements have taken place in France since 2010. With such a large number of demonstrations and protests during this period, France became the most protesting nation in the world. On one hand, France is famous for its rich history, cultural heritage, beautiful scenery, and magnificent fragrances. Before World War II, France was considered the second largest empire in the world after Great Britain. And even today, it is one of the strongest economies in the world. But on the other hand, it has also gained a reputation as a hotbed of social unrest and mass protests. From the historic French Revolution to the recent protest, the French people have long exercised their right to dissent and take to the street dozens of times. In today's video, we will look at the reason behind the continued trend of demonstration and protest in French society. To understand the protest culture of France today, we have to go back to the 1780s, means just before the French Revolution of 1789. At that time, a common form of street protest was called charivari. These people used to bang the pots, raise slogans against them, and demand that the accused be expelled from the city as punishment. Its purpose was to publicly shame and ridicule those involved in any social or moral vice. Friends, since the French people already had a tradition of protest and demonstration, these demonstrations increased rapidly over time. Meanwhile, homes of corrupt politicians and disreputable government officials continued to be targeted. Since then, protests have become an integral part of French public life. And the explanation of this tradition also exists as a historical, factual case of the French Revolution. The main causes of French Revolution of 1789 included social inequality, political discontent, financial crisis, and food shortages, severe socio-economic division, lack of political representation, and extravagant spending by the monarchy fueled popular resentment. Additionally, financial crisis and economic hardship due to poor harvest and rising food price fueled revolutionary fervor. Despite all this difficult situation, more heavy taxes were imposed on the people by the government. These factors led to the beginning of a transformative period in French history, resulting in violent protests and riots that left an indelible mark on Europe in general and French society in particular. These demonstrations, protests, and riots eventually led to the end of the monarchy in France, significant changes in the French political and social system, and the first French Republic was established in 1792. The period from 1792 to 1799 is also known as the Age of Terror in France, in which approximately 20,000 people were considered opponents of the French Revolution were executed. Then in 1799, Napoleon Bonaparte emerged as prominent military and political figure. France won numerous victories during his reign. But after the vast defeat at the hands of Russia in 1812, Napoleon's reign began to decline. And finally in 1815, the monarchy was once again restored in France after the execution of Louis XVIII to the throne. After the establishment of the Bourbon monarchy in 1815, protest and demonstration again started. But this time the protests were more organized and politically motivated. The demands for political reforms, social justice, and workers' rights triggered mass protest and strike and uprising. In 1830, the July Revolution overthrew the Bourbon monarchy. But instead of an elected government, it is replaced by another monarchy, known as the July monarchy. Then the June Rebellion of 1832 demonstrated the desire of change among students and the workers. Although this rebellion against the king failed, but it became a symbol of resistance against oppressive rule and an example for future generations. Similarly, in 1848, there were strong protests against the system and a public movement started. Born out of a wave of popular uprising, these movements sought political reforms, social justice, and economic improvement. These protests led to the end of the July monarchy established in July 1830, and the Second French Republic was formed. Louis Napoleon, who was also the nephew of Napoleon Bonaparte, became the President of France. However, in 1851, Louis Napoleon, being President of France, dissolved the National Assembly and declared himself king. In this way, the monarchy was once again established in France. France was defeated in Franco-German War of 1870, ended the Napoleon monarchy and established the France Third Republic. During this war, the National Guard of Paris defended the city and were very popular with the public. According to them, the newly elected government of France is not the real spokesperson of the people. So they took control of Paris after the end of the war and refused to accept the authority of the newly established government. This government, which lasted only 2 months in Paris, is known as the Paris Commune. However, the movement was eventually forcefully crushed by government forces, but it played an important role in shaping French democratic society and the ongoing struggle for justice and change. This system continued until 1940, when Germans occupied France in World War II, while in 1945, after the end of the war, the Fourth French Republic was established. Collectively, all these protests and the social movement reflected popular discontent and the need for political and economic reforms. These movements determined the future direction of French society, contributing to the ongoing struggle for social justice, political reforms and workers' rights that is still reflected in modern France. In France, protests are often motivated by genuine grievances related to social and economic issues. High unemployment rates, income inequality, and austerity measures have fueled continued public discontent. For example, in 1995, protests broke out against proposed reform to the French welfare system, including changes to the pension system and labor law. Millions of workers went on strike, shutting down public transport and paralyzing the country's economy. And finally, the government was forced to concede the demands. In 2018, the Yellow Vest movement emerged in France. What started as protests against heavy taxes on petrol and diesel quickly transformed into a broader expression of discontent against economic inequality, declining living standards, and the government. During demonstrations, participants wore a distinctive yellow vest. That is why it is called Yellow Vest movement. The Yellow Vest movement put considerable pressure on the French government, which resulted in the government withdrawing a proposed tax increase on fuel. Apart from this, the minimum wage of employees was also increased, and tax cuts were announced for low-income earners. The movement highlighted the economic and social division within French society and triggered a national debate about bridging the gap between rich and poor. Friends, as we mentioned, France has a long tradition of demonstration and protests. But this is not only due to the political or social instability, but also due to the powerful labor unions in France. The Matignon Agreements of 1936 are a prominent example of labor union solidarity in France. These agreements between the government, labor unions, and employees introduced significant improvements in workers' rights and conditions. They got the right to strike a 40-hour work week, introduced paid leaves, and increased wages. The Matignon Agreements demonstrated the power of organized labor movements and their ability to bring about substantial change. It is also very important here that the French unions are not only strong because of their numbers or unity among themselves, but a main and important reason for this is also the government's law that give countless rights to the working class and the working people of France. According to one report, only 8% of French workers belong to labor unions compared to an average of 25% in Europe. However, due to French law, these unions are more active than in other European countries. But because one of the reasons for their powers are government laws, there is always the possibility that the government can revoke them at will. Perhaps this is the reason why these unions are very active and are always ready to fight against any policy that may solidify their rights or threaten them in the future. In 2006, the government proposed a labor law that would have allowed an employer to terminate an employee's contract without any reason within the first 2 years of employment. The introduction of the law led to widespread protests and strikes by various labor unions, and the government eventually had to withdraw the law. Student movements have also historically played an important role in French protest. Students often act as a catalyst for broader social and political movements. The historic May 1968 protest in France began as the student movements at the University of Paris, demanding economic reforms and greater student participation in university governance. These protests quickly spread to other universities. The scale and intensity of the student protest had a profound effect on French society, leading to a general strike that paralyzed a sector of the economy. These demonstrations played an important role in creating a large protest movement and once again mobilizing the French people. Since 1968, student organizations and unions have been active in advocating for educational reforms, social justice, and various causes, highlighting the importance and influence of students in the protest tradition in France. Friends, these various factors collectively contribute to a long history of protest in France, making it a nation where dissent, protest, and demonstration have a special significance. Despite being a colonial empire of the past and so developed nation, France has a history of protest. But have there ever been such protest or demonstration in your country that resulted in reforms for common people? Please let us know your opinion in comment section. If you found the video informative, then like it and subscribe to the channel. Thanks.